Welcome, everyone, to the Beating the Holiday Blues with Rational Self-Counseling webinar. My name is Dr. Aldo Pucci, and I'm president of the National Association excuse me, of Cognitive Behavioral Therapists. We're based in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and spend a lot of time conducting trainings for mental health professionals, providing supervision, and so it's nice to conduct also, as we are today, a briefer webinar than the 2-hour webinars that I normally do for mental health professionals, but that is available to everyone, and applicable to everyone. Beating the Holiday Blues. And so it's certainly a timely webinar, and it's my hope that you will benefit from the information and perhaps share it with others who could be helpful. And there'll be a recording if Zoom does its job. There'll be a recording of this that I will share with you all and post to various places as well, YouTube, etc. Okay. All right. And by the way, and we had 100 people sign up for this webinar, the maximum capacity for it. And so hoping that other folks will join as well, as we're about a third of the way here. So now I encourage you to ask questions. Please do. If you're wondering what we're discussing might apply to you or to others that you know, please feel free to ask. If you're confused about what I'm sharing with you, or you have any difficulty with it, please let me know. And you can do so, since this is a webinar format, Zoom webinar format, you can ask questions in two places, either the chat section of the app or the Q&A section. Okay. All right. So beating the holiday blues with rational self-counseling. Now, so we're talking about the holidays, and I suppose a great question is, first of all, what is a holiday? People often refer to this time of the year as the holidays, right? The end of normally the December time, maybe include Thanksgiving in what they're thinking in terms of the holidays. So what is a holiday? A holiday, one definition is a holiday is a special day. So it's not just any day, right? It's a special day that is set aside. Now, this is for rest, for celebration. Notice the word or commemoration, because sometimes we might have a holiday that is a commemoration, but we're not celebrating. We're not saying, oh, it's a wonderful thing, for example, that these veterans died. We might be thankful, certainly, and I hope we are, that they fought for us and were willing to give their lives for our freedoms. But we don't exactly celebrate the fact that they died, right? And so it could be a celebration or a commemoration, and it differs from an ordinary day because people typically take time off from work or school, although there are those who have to work during, like police officers, for example, people who work in hospitals, etc., mills, participate in traditions, or got with family members and friends. So you notice the word or there. So according to this definition, it's possible to have a holiday where you celebrate, but you do not gather with family and friends. Or maybe typically people do gather with family and friends, but it's not a requirement. You can celebrate without doing so, for example. Okay. So with that in mind, that typically when we think of a holiday, not always, but usually when we think of a holiday, we think of it as being a celebration. The question is this then: if it's a celebration, why would anyone be upset? And how could anyone be upset? Okay. Well, if the celebration itself is what's causing people's feelings and behaviors, and the celebration were objectively pleasing and happiness causing, then everyone would be happy during that holiday. But as we know, many people aren't. And as a matter of fact, there are people who would love to just skip that entire season because either it's irrelevant to them, or some describe the fact that they hate it. Okay, so why would anyone be upset, and how could anyone be upset? Well, let's look at the how first. Okay, so to do that, it's important to understand how our emotions work. Okay? And so, whenever we feel a feeling or engage in a behavior, three things happen. And this is what we call the ABCs of emotions. And these ABCs apply to you and to me and to everyone else whose brain and body are working properly in relation to their emotions. So, the first thing that happens whenever we feel a feeling is we're aware of something. So, in other words, we see something, we hear something, someone says something to us. We're aware that it's the holiday season, for example. Then the next thing that happens is we think or believe something about this thing that we're aware of. So that's the B in the emotional ABCs. We think or believe something about this thing. Now, the way we think about this thing will be one of three different ways. It'll either be a positive thought, a neutral thought, or a negative thought. Okay? So a positive thought about this thing that we're aware of would be something like, this is a good thing. Okay, so a positive thought is a favorable assessment of something. You view it as being a good thing. A negative thought is an unfavorable assessment of something. So in other words, you see or hear something, you're aware of something, and you think it's a bad thing. And a neutral thought is an indifferent assessment of something, meaning that you don't view it as being good or bad. You know, it's irrelevant to you, perhaps. Okay. So now, the way we think about what we're aware of then tells our brain how to make the rest of our body feel, and that is the C, the emotional consequence. And it also tells our brain how to make our body act. That's our behavior. So naturally, then, a positive thought about this thing that we're aware of tells our brain to make our body feel a positive feeling. We're happy, we're excited. A negative thought tells our brain to make our body feel a negative feeling, depressed, angry, anxious. But it's important to keep in mind that when we say a negative feeling, we only mean that it's an unpleasant feeling, not that there's anything at all wrong with feeling that way. And a neutral thought tells our brain to make our body feel a neutral feeling. Now, most people do not know what a neutral feeling is because no one bothers to teach us this, but the word that best describes a neutral feeling is the word calm. Okay, calm. For example, how has your left cheek been feeling, as we've been meeting? Has it felt particularly good so that you thought, wow, my cheek feels good today? Probably not. Has your cheek hurt so that you thought, wow, man, my cheek hurts. Maybe I'm getting a toothache or something. I hope not. Now, your cheek, if you've ever had dental work, you know what no feeling feels like, right? If you have like Novocaine or something, you know what no feeling feels like. And so it's doubtful it felt that way, right? So the word that best describes how your cheek has been feeling is calm. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about learning how to feel better, okay? So we're aware of something, we think something about what we're aware of, and then the way we think determines how we feel and what we do. So the bottom line is this, and the main message of the ABC model, and this is what we call the ABCs of emotions, the main message with this ABC model is what we're wanting folks to understand is that how our emotions work is that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors, not people and situations and things and events, but what we think about people and things and situations and events. Okay. And I say, thank God for that. Thank God that it's our thoughts that cause our feelings and behaviors, not people and things and situations. Because, I'm sure most, if not all of us, learned growing up that things cause our feelings and behaviors, right? How many times have you said or you heard other people say, he made me mad, it made me happy, that made me sad, or the holidays are depressing, they're depressing me. But in fact, what we taught was wrong. It was incorrect. What actually causes our feelings and behaviors is what we think about people and things and situations, how we think about it. And so, if what we had been taught were correct, that things cause our feelings and behaviors, what that would mean is that we would be things emotional slaves, that we wouldn't have any say in the matter. Okay. So that if someone wanted us to be angry, for example, we would have to be because they would be making us. But thankfully, it's how we think about what is going on in our lives. It's how we think about what people say or do, or what time of the year it is, the season, the holiday, what goes on during it. It's what we think about those things that cause our feelings and behaviors. And why that is such a wonderful thing is because if we're feeling a way we would rather not feel, or engaging in a behavior that's a problem for us, we can learn how to think differently about what's going on so as to feel and act differently, even if the situation doesn't change, right? And see, that's the beauty of this. Your situation does not have to change at all for you to change the way you feel and act, because you can change the way you think. And as a matter of fact, even if your situation does change, let's say it improves in some way, you still have to change your thinking along with it. Otherwise, you will act as if it hadn't changed. Okay. So, the wonderful thing about how our emotions work, and this is good news. And as a matter of fact, if there were one thing that you got from this webinar today, if you didn't already know it, I would hope it would be this. And that is, our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors, not people and things and situations and events. Okay. So that's good news number one. The second wonderful thing about how our emotions work is that there are three emotional options, not two. Okay. Most people believe, because that's what we've been taught, that there are only two emotional options. We are either happy or we are miserable. Okay. So something personally undesirable happens to us. Let's say, we were really hoping for a loved one to be able to make it for Christmas, and they just can't get to your home. They just can't be there. Um, well, let's see. If you really wanted them to be there, it doesn't make sense for you to be happy about it. So if there are only two options, what's the only other option? And that is to be upset about it. But thankfully, there is this third emotional option that our bodies have always known about, that no one's bothered to teach us, and that is this in between or calm, so that we're not happy about it, but we're not miserable either. Okay. So feelings that are more along the lines of calm, because it's a continuum, okay, are like sad as opposed to depressed. Okay. Irritated as opposed to angry. So the more along the lines of calm we feel, the better we feel, first of all. And also, usually, the better position we're in to find a solution to our personally undesirable situation. I don't know if you've noticed, but very often when a person is really bogged down in feeling miserable, it's very difficult for them to, number one, be happy about anything else, right? As long as they are making themselves miserable about one thing. And secondly, it's more difficult for them to make use of their knowledge, their intelligence, their resources to find a solution to their problem if there is one. Okay. And so by learning how to move from feeling very depressed or angry or very anxious about what's going on to feeling more along the lines of calm, like sad about it or irritated, or perhaps even completely calm. Not only does that put us in a much better position to be happy about other things, but it also helps us to make use of the intelligence we have, the knowledge that we have to find a solution, if there is one. So it's hard to tell how many people this holiday season, because something hasn't gone the way that that they wanted it to be, more likely thought they needed it to be, will make themselves unintentionally, make themselves miserable about it, and therefore not enjoy anything about the holidays because they are so caught up in their misery about what didn't go right. But instead, if we move our thinking, adjust our thinking, we're going to talk about that here in a moment, from misery producing thoughts to thoughts that cause more calm feelings more along the lines of calm, like that cause sadness, for example, or irritation, or just a little anxiety, then that will free you up to enjoy other aspects of the holiday, even though what you wanted, a certain aspect of it didn't work out the way you wanted. Okay. All right. So two wonderful things about how our emotions work is our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors, and there are three emotional options, not two. Okay, so does anyone have any question about this or any concern with this? It looks like we had a okay. Any question about the ABCs and the fact that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors? Any disagreement with it at all? Because if you don't buy the fact, and this isn't just speculation, it's an actual fact that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors. If you don't buy it, then it's gonna be very difficult for you to make yourself the way you want to feel, the way you want to feel, and otherwise, there'll be people who refuse to accept the ABCs of emotions and the fact that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors will make attempts to make themselves feel better in other ways that aren't effective but temporarily do, perhaps like to drink or drug or distract themselves or a variety of other things. Okay. All right. With that said, then, how do we upset ourselves over the holidays? Well, first of all, like I said, by the fact that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors, first of all, right? Okay, someone asked here, it makes sense. My clients are insistent that if another person did not do the behavior, then they wouldn't feel the way they do. It typically takes time for them to come around to understanding this concept. Well, and what I teach folks is that what I teach folks is that what people do, for example, like in this example, Monica, that you bring up, is the A in your emotional ABCs, right? So if someone acts in a certain way and I upset myself about it, if they hadn't act that way, I wouldn't have had that thing for me to upset myself about it, right? Unless I'm hallucinating. But that's not to say that their behavior causes my upset. They just gave me something to react to. Okay. And so thankfully, it's our thinking that causes our feelings and behaviors, not people and things and situations. Because if it were a fact that the person's behavior is causing our emotions and behaviors, there wouldn't be anything we could do about it other than avoid them. But now it's a historical event for you to think back on, and so you see where that goes. Oh yeah, someone else said I never thought of another emotion, calm, and there are different levels. Yeah, well, let me tell you, you're not alone. Yeah, but calm is a feeling. Like, and another example I give is, have you ever walked up to someone or have you ever sat in front of a television not feeling particularly happy so that you noticed, or upset so that you noticed, but just kind of sat there? Most people say, yeah, that is calm feeling. However, if someone were to walk up to you and ask you, hey, what are you feeling right now? You might say, I'm not feeling anything. But remember, the only time we feel nothing is if there's something wrong with our brain and body, like our spinal cord is severed, or if we're under general anesthesia, which is a wonderful thing if you're having surgery. But otherwise, we're always feeling something. Okay. And calm is a feeling. And by the way, complete calm feeling is the result of being indifferent about whatever it is that you're aware of. Okay. So, for example, A, what am I aware of? My Pittsburgh Steelers lost once again this past Sunday. At B, what do I think? This is a bad thing. And so, how do I feel at C? Sad about the fact. What do other football fans who don't like the Steelers think? This is a terrific and wonderful thing. So, they're happy. But then you have a lot of people that couldn't care less one way or another, do not even know that a football game occurred. And so they are completely indifferent to the fact that my dear Steelers lost the game. So therefore, they would be completely calm about it. Okay. Yes, I will make the recording available to you all as well. Yeah, so you can share it with others. Okay. All right, let's see here. Someone else. Go Bills. Yeah, they put a whooping on my Steelers. Someone said, as a person thinks, so he is. Yeah, that's right. Psychologists like to think that they discovered this, um, this is recorded in the Bible. We've known it much longer but way before Albert Ellis ever came around. Okay. Someone else asked, is there a handout for this training? There isn't, but I will send it like a summary to you all probably tomorrow, including a link to the recording and all that. Oh, you're welcome. So it said, curious, how do you move people from upset to calm? Another great question. Well, usually, and we're going to talk about this here in a moment now, usually misery is produced by thoughts like, I can't take it, I can't stand it, I need it not be, it must be the way I want it to be, etc. And so we help them to move it to more along the lines of calm, if that's what they're wanting, by helping them to change this is terrible, horrible, awful to it's unfortunate and unpleasant. Move from I can't take it, I can't stand it to I can stand it, but I very much dislike it. See, so taking it out of the category of life-threatening and putting it into the category of unpleasant, uncomfortable, where it belongs. Out of the category of I need this like I'm going to die if I don't have it, into the category of I only want it and therefore I'll be disappointed if I don't have it. Okay. And so that's a great question. Another great question, is there a continuum between happy and calm? There is. However, we at least in the English language, do not seem to have very many words associated with those feelings in between. It's unfortunate, we just don't see it. Another person asked, do the ABCs of emotions explain all causes of emotional response? Now, the key word here is response, because if it is a response to something and the person demonstrates voluntary control over their behavior, for example, if they put their mind on something else, they feel differently, then the ABCs will explain that emotion or behavior. But what it doesn't explain is when people have a feeling that is the result of a physical problem in their body. For example, a person, and by the way, like for example, if a person has feels depressive symptoms because of hypothyroidism, in rational living therapy, the approach that I take to CBT, in rational living therapy, we would not call that depression. We would call that a thyroid problem. So they feel as if they're depressed, but in fact, what's actually causing it is hypothyroidism. So if a person says to me, I feel depressed, one of the first questions I ask them is, what are you depressed about? What are you feeling depressed about? If they can tell me, well, because my wife left me and I have these bills I don't think I can pay, and they are reacting to things, then it probably means that the ABCs are going to apply. Okay. On the other hand, if they say, I have no idea, I really am not depressed about anything that I know of, but I sure feel down, and nothing's gone on. And it seems like no matter what I do, I just can't shake this down feeling, no matter what I put my mind on. Then I might say, hey, let's get you checked out medically just to make sure that there's nothing physically going on with you to cause these symptoms. Okay. Yes, another great question. All right, let's see. Okay, someone else asked, how does grief over death during the holidays fit into all this? Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that. Yeah. As a matter of fact, a dear friend of mine, I just learned couple hours ago, his mother passed just today. And so we're going to talk about that and how to not only more calmly accept that, but how to feel the way you want to feel during the holidays, despite that fact. Okay. And so we're going to get into that. Great question. All right. So now, the how. First of all, so since we know that our thoughts cause our feelings and behaviors, one of the things that we do with our thinking is place conditions of happiness and contentment. For example, I cannot be happy or content unless. So during the holiday season, the only way I can be happy during the holiday season is if this happens, or if I get this, or if this person shows up, or if this person doesn't show up. So there are these conditions on happiness or contentment that people sincerely believe. They just happen to be wrong, but they sincerely believe that the only way I could be content or happy is if this occurs. But the fact is, the only thing you actually need to be happy is a brain and body that are working properly in terms of how our emotions work, and happiness producing thoughts. That is it. Happiness or contentment producing thoughts. Otherwise, there is no requirement that anything outside of you be a certain way for you to be happy or content. That is all just made up. We learn conditions of contentment. We learn conditions of happiness. And so, as a matter of fact, what we also learn is this next point. If it's not the way I insist it be, I must make myself miserable about it. So not only can I not be happy if it's not a certain way, I have to take it a step further and make myself miserable about it if it's not the way I insist it be. And the fact is, there's nothing about the human brain and body and how our emotions work that requires us to make ourselves miserable about anything, or that requires us to make ourselves happy or content about anything for that matter. Okay. So therefore, if the good news is that if you're, in this case, for our topic of discussion, if your holiday isn't the way you want it to be, you can work to calmly accept that fact and find happiness. Make yourself happy about other aspects of the holiday, or content with other aspects of the holiday. So sure, I'm not happy that my favorite uncle cannot make it for our Christmas dinner. I'm not happy about that fact, but I am happy that everyone else is going to be there, and or at least I'm content with that, that everyone else is going to be there. Okay. But there's no requirement that you make yourself miserable if Uncle Joe isn't at the dinner table. Okay. All right. Any question about that fact? People place conditions. The only way I can be happy is if. And what I say is the only way you're going to be happy, the only thing you need to be happy is a brain and body that are working properly in relation to our emotions and behaviors, and happiness producing thoughts. That's it. Okay. All right. Now, so confusing needs and wants is a very important thing to understand. When people make themselves miserable, whether they're very depressed or very anxious or very angry, I can guarantee you that they are thinking a need type thought. And so if that's how you've been feeling, I can guarantee you that you are thinking a need type thought. So let's look at this. In rational living therapy, we like to categorize needs into two types. There are absolute needs and there are conditional needs. Okay. Absolute needs are those things that are required for survival, those things that keep us alive, such as air, food, water, a certain amount of warmth. Sometimes a person needs a particular medication to remain alive. Okay. Everything else on this planet is a want or a desire. The only problem is that often, very often, people mislabel wants as being needs. And so therefore, how do they feel? How do they act? How do they react when they go without those things? The same as they would if they were going without air and food and water. You can see it in their actions. You can see it in their reactions, that they're equating something with a life or death situation. Okay. And so the example I like to give is, let's say that I'm working with a gentleman, and one day he comes to the office and for therapy, and he's shaking. His voice is quivering, and I ask him, "Wow, what's the matter? What's wrong?" And he said, "My wife left me." Now, in that situation, is he acting as though he wants his wife and he sure will be disappointed if she doesn't return? Or is he acting like he's going to drop dead any second? Right? His body doesn't lie. We can see that he's equating this with a life or death situation, as if she were heir to him. Now, no matter how poetic that might sound, the fact is, no matter how outstanding, wonderful, terrific, and unique she she is only a want, thank God, and not a need. Especially thank God if she doesn't return, right? Now, there are conditional need statements. That's the second kind of need that we define in rational therapy. Conditional need statements that may or may not be accurate. Okay. A conditional need statement is a this is required for that type of statement. This is needed for that. For example, to make chocolate cake, you need chocolate. That's probably an accurate conditional need statement. Okay. So let's say you are wanting to make it to a family member's home who lives across the country for the holidays, and you have your flight ready. It's all booked, and you're looking forward to going there, to getting there. And so we might say, you might say, for me to get to their home, I need to travel there. That's probably an accurate conditional need statement. However, let's say you get to the airport and your flight, and all of the flights, as a matter of fact, are canceled for whatever reason. And it's just too far for you to drive. By the time you get there, it'll be time to come home. And so there's just no way to make it to your relative's home. If you panicked over that fact, then you would be equating it with an absolute need, like your life depends on it. That we certainly can dispute and obviously would be incorrect. So the difference here is this a matter of life and death? Or is this an inconvenience? Maybe even a huge inconvenience, but just that, an inconvenience. Okay. So that's the difference between an absolute need and a want. But when you look at people when they're very angry, for example, they are acting as though someone or something is trying to kill them. Have you noticed that? Like they're equating something with a life or death situation. If someone panics, over something, makes them very anxious over something, they are reacting the same as they would if they were in the woods and they turned around and a bear were ready to attack them, or they were in the ocean and someone yelled, "Hey, shark!" And they see the fin and all that. It's the same reaction. And the fact is, our brain allows us to equate anything with a life or death situation. So that's why it's on us to make certain that we accurately label something as something that we absolutely need, or is it something that we only want? We might very much want it, and therefore make ourselves disappointed that if we don't get it. But there's a huge difference between that and the misery that comes with mistakenly labeling it an absolute need, even though you're treating it as though it's an absolute need. So one of the questions was, how do we help people move from that from the misery to feelings more along the lines of calm? This, without a doubt, is one of the ways. Helping people to take these things that they're equating with an absolute need, or situations that they're equating with a life or death situation, out of that category and putting it into the category of things that I want, things that I prefer to be, what I very much desire, but certainly it's not a life or death situation if I don't have it. Okay. All right. Looks like we have a question here. Seems experiencing circumstances as absolute need is so much more common. Why do you think that is? Because we're taught to do that. We are taught that there are things that you need. The Beatles, all you need is love, right? We're taught in songs, "Can't live if living is without you." Sounds very romantic, but it's nutty. And so we're taught, if you put an infant in a lion's cage, unless the lion makes a loud noise and startles the child does not know to be afraid of that lion. So we learn to equate things with absolute needs. People panic over the possibility that someone might think poorly of them when they give their speech, might criticize them in some way, as if they need their approval. And so we're taught this nonsense, and so it's no wonder. And so that's why that's common. Why recognizing that it's a want instead of a need is not common is because that teaching is not common. So, great question. Another statement: we must be aware of our feelings and label them appropriately. Yeah, I agree. And as a matter of fact, in rational living therapy, one of the things we teach is that these feeling lists that you see, hundreds of words, most of them are not feelings at all. They're actually evaluations. But that's a whole other topic. Okay. All right, great. So therefore, when you see, people in a store on Black Friday fighting over a television, coming to blows over a television, they're acting as though they're fighting over, food that someone's going to starve if they don't have. Okay. And so, or you see people making themselves very depressed or very anxious. There's a need thought there. So if that's how you've been feeling, it's time to work on that and say, well, no, as much as I want this, as strongly, as much as I prefer to have this, thank God it's only a want. I'll survive not having it. I'll be very disappointed, but thankfully I'll survive. So I refuse to treat this like it's something that will kill me if I don't have it, or if it doesn't work out the way I want, or etc. And by the way, also in relation to others as well, right? Sometimes parents fret over, well, what's going to happen? We're going to get into this. What's going to happen, to my child if I can't get them this? It'll be traumatizing. It'd be a horrible thing if they were disappointed, and like they couldn't take it or stand it. And we're going to get into that. Okay. All right. Okay, so what are some examples of things that we do not need? That present we're hoping for. Yes, even the guitar that I hope my wife is going to get me, I only want it and I do not need it. People to show up at our party, to attend a party. People to be courteous, how dare they cut in front of me in the line, you might prefer that, but it's not as though their cutting in front of you will kill you. Being happy or content. There's no requirement we be happy, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. Or content, as if our survival depends on it. We might very much want it. We sure might enjoy it, and maybe even appreciate it when we feel that way. But there is no biological requirement for survival that we be happy or content. People to treat us like they love us. Sometimes people will make an inference. They will come to the conclusion, well, this person didn't contact me on the holiday, or didn't give me a gift or something. They must not love me. But why do they think that's a horrible thing? Because I need them to love me. And what I'm saying here is that no, you don't. You might want it. You might very much prefer it. You might be very thankful for it if you have it. But it's important for us to take it out of the category of an absolute need, like it's air and we'll die if we don't have it, and put it into the category of something that I want and prefer, but thankfully can live without. And once I come to that conclusion, then I can find enjoyment and contentment and happiness is much easier to anyhow with other things. Or a date for New Year's Eve, for example. Okay. Or to be home for the holidays. Now, this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, that I put home in quotations, to be home for the holidays. So, I'm not disputing the fact that old Christmas song, "There's no place like home for the holidays." That might be the case for many people. But the reason I have home in quotes is because um, uh, one of the problematic things, just like someone had mentioned, it's important for us to label the our emotions correctly. I find it fascinating, and I find that one of the reasons why people upset themselves and why they're perpetually homesick, even though they're 80 years old, is because they're never home. Home to them is where they grew up. Home to them is the house that they lived in before they went off and got married and all that. Home is the town that they were raised in, or etc. So the place that they live now is never their home. And so that's why I put home in quotes. So it's no wonder. And this is something that I realized very early on. When my wife and I got married, we moved from the Pittsburgh area to Virginia for me to go to graduate school, and it just dawned on me then. And I told her, "Sweetheart, I think the best thing that we could do to avoid sickness, so to speak," and I didn't know anything about cognitive behavioral therapy yet, is to call where we're at right now home. And what we're doing is going to visit our parents for the holidays or whenever we do that. But you and I are home. Home is where we are together. And that was very helpful. Okay, let's see. Another question here. Okay, someone else asked, what about depression from loneliness? How does company companionship relation fall in the need category if it is to prevent loneliness and depression? Okay, so first of all, that's a great question. I say that there is no such emotion as loneliness, even though that's what we call it. There is being alone, and then how a person reacts to it. They might make themselves sad in reaction to it, or anxious in reaction to it, or angry or depressed in reaction to it. And because of the context, they will call it loneliness or lonely. And so that's the first thing, how we approach it in RLT. Secondly, it's important for us to keep in mind that not having people around you does not cause these feelings. It's your thinking about it, and how you think about it. It's your own thoughts that are upsetting. That it's your thoughts that are causing your distress in reaction to being by yourself. And we know for a fact that that being by yourself does not cause upset feelings, because number one, it's not biologically possible, and two, there are many people who prefer to be by themselves. And so if objectively being by yourself caused distress, then you would expect everyone to be distressed, right? So the cure. So on a practical, and we're going to talk more about this on a practical level, if a person's preference is to be with others, especially during the holiday season, let's say, then they might do practical things, take practical measures to see what they can do to be with people, encourage people to be with them. But otherwise, it's important for them to work on that thinking that's causing their distress in relation to being by themselves. Okay. Not to mention the fact, have you ever been, in a group of people that you don't know? There are plenty of people around you, but still had the impression that you were lonely. So it's thinking, right? It's thinking. So that's a terrific question. Okay. So then we have shoulds and demands as well. And these demands and shoulds and musts often are just other words for a need type idea. If you look at their actions, it's like they're equating it with a life or death situation. Okay? I must be happy, need to be happy during the holiday seasons. So if someone says that to me, I ask them for what? Why must you be happy or need to be happy? To accomplish what or to do what? um, uh, there's no requirement that you be happy. If you can name a goal that requires you to be happy during the holidays, except the goal of being happy, then that's one thing. But sometimes people will say, well, but how am I supposed to act, at our party, around everyone? Well, I would say, well, that's up to you. But if you think there's some advantage to hiding the fact that you're not particularly happy, then you can act like you're happy, fake it without actually feeling happy. Okay. So this idea, I must be, there's something wrong with me if I'm not, that's just made up. I must, and likewise, I must enjoy the holidays. Now, I don't know, maybe there is something about a person's religion that says that they are required to observe the holidays. That's one thing. But does it actually say you must enjoy it? Now, which is different than saying, if you were really thinking, you would enjoy it. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But where's the evidence that you must enjoy it? It must be this way, otherwise it's not Christmas. Many of you know that I am a retired Baptist pastor as well as a mental health professional and cognitive behavioral therapist as well. I was a Baptist pastor for years, and one of the things that I found is that people often use the Christmas holiday as an opportunity to upset themselves about something. And one year we had a couple come to the church. They had just started coming like a month before Christmas, and they happened to ask me, "Are you going to have a Christmas tree up here in the church building anywhere?" And I said to them, well, folks typically have put up a tree. He said, well, if that's the case, we're not going to come during that time, but once the season's over and it comes down, then we'll come back, because they were just they thought it was wrong to have a Christmas tree, and so my thought was, there's no way I'm going to put a tree above people. I cared about them coming, and there was no requirement that we have a Christmas tree anywhere in the building, anywhere on the planet for that matter, to celebrate, the Lord's birth. And so I said to the congregation, this year, this couple happened to have to miss that week. I said, this year we are going to refrain from having a Christmas tree, and here's why. And the blowback I had from some people was just unbelievable. They ended up leaving the church over a Christmas tree, because how can it be Christmas without a tree? And I said, well, let me show you how. And they left anyhow. So I must give others blank. Okay? And so that idea itself could cause a person to feel anxious if they're afraid of the consequence of not like, for example, if I don't get my kids the gifts they want, they'll be miserable and that'll be a horrible thing and they're going to grow up disturbed adults. So that would be anxiety, right? Your fear, or depression. Sometimes with thoughts like, I'm hopeless and useless because I can't get them these things, and thoughts like that, or guilt. I'm doing wrong for not getting these things if I don't. And I should, and I'm not, and it's a terrible thing. Okay. Or others must give me, which usually is anger. How dare you not give me these things? Um, and So they're angry. They make themselves angry at others who don't give them what they want with that should statement. You should, you must. How dare you not? Which sure sounds like entitlement mentality to me, does it not to you? So think about this. What must others do for you? What must you do for others? Do you believe during this season? What must you get others? What must they get you? Do you have a list of those things? I encourage you to write them down and then challenge them. Where is the evidence that it must be this way? Is this something that I want? And therefore it makes sense that I'd be disappointed if I don't get it. Or is it a need and I'll drop dead if I don't have it? And conversely, if I'm not able to do these things for others, will that be an unfortunate thing? Or will that be the end of them or me or both? Okay. Really work at challenging these things. Where is the evidence that it must be this way? It has to be this way. It should be this way. Yeah, another one, my kids must get what they asked for. It'll be terrible if they don't. And you think of the anxiety that many people make themselves feel over the possibility of not their kids not being disappointed. Like disappointment is going to be some kind of life altering thing that will create long-term disturbance. Which, first of all, the lack of a present isn't what causes anything. It's a person's thoughts about it. So the more that we model calm acceptance, rational disappointment, the more that will rub off on our kids and help them to react the same way. Okay. See, I think we have a question here. Could this help with SAD, seasonal affective disorder? Seems like that some melatonin nightly works for me to lift the general feeling of sadness when the days start to get shorter. It seems as sad may be or can be differentiated from one's thoughts about the holidays. Yeah, well, that's a possibility. Often it's vitamin D. So, I mean, if melatonin is helpful for you, terrific. Vitamin D, vitamin D deficiency often is related to this the lethargic down feeling that people feel. But it's very important for us to distinguish between that and thoughts, depressing thoughts about the fact that it's dark at 5 o'clock and I'm bored and it's terrible that I can't be outside because it's freezing and I don't know what to do with myself and I can't take that and those kinds of upsetting thoughts about that time of year. For a lot of people, other people are probably in Arizona are probably laughing at that discussion, um, but but certainly, but there are some biological things that can occur, like a lack of sunlight, relating to a lack of vitamin D, and so there are some physical things that can help with that, certainly. Okay. Okay, other shoulds and demands like people must not be rude to me. I can't stand it when they are. People must not be in my way. I have a right to be here and you don't. I shouldn't have to wait in line. I hate it when I have to. So let's talk about turning needs into wants, turning needs and wants, I'm sorry, to uh, uh, and must to preferences. I want I want that present, but I do not need it, right? My desire is that, and I'm hoping that I will, but I in no way need it. I prefer that people show up at our party, but I'll be okay if they do not. My desire is to attend the party, but if I can't, it will only be unfortunate. I like people to be courteous, but I don't need it. My desire is to be happy and content. I don't need it, but I desire it. I want people to treat me like they love me, but my existence does not depend on it. If I do not have a date for New Year's Eve, I can be content doing something else instead. However, I don't need to be content. I only want it. My strong desire is to be home for the holidays, but if I cannot make it, I'll be okay. I prefer people to be courteous rather than rude, but I can stand it when they are not. Under most circumstances, other people have just as much right to be where I am as I do. It's kind of like this idea, this fantasy that people have when I go to the store, it'll be empty and I'll be the only one in there. There won't be anyone in my way because it's my allotted time. Like it's not possible that other people had the idea to be there at the same time, and like that you have a right to be there and they don't. Okay, now of course not, unless maybe it's your store. Of course, I sometimes have to wait in line. Waiting is a part of life. I can stand it. I just don't like it. My kids must never be sad or disappointed. Well, what's the response to that? Disappointment is a part of life. I will do my best, or I will do the best I can to get them what they want, but they will get over it if I'm unable to get it for them. What they want are wants and not needs. Okay. All right. Any question about that? Looks like we have, okay. Let's see here. Reframing. Yeah, someone said reframing using different language and words and ones that are accurate. Yes, ones that describe reality as it actually is, not how they mistakenly describe. Sure, certainly. Now, here's another point to consider, and that is sometimes it's the idea of it. Like someone doesn't show up for your party or some event that you have or something like that, and you think to yourself, well, how dare they not come to my party? But in reality, as I say here, your party and your enjoyment did not depend on them attending it. And as a matter of fact, you might have not really actually really wanted them to be there. So in that case, a person is upset about the idea of it, not the consequence of it. And as folks who have trained know, I talk about this a lot. We see this a great deal in mental health. People making themselves miserable over the idea of something rather than the impact, the actual impact on their life. And so, is it possible? So someone doesn't show up. is it possible for us to have this party and to enjoy it without them? Yes, it is. So any amount of upset I make myself over the fact that they didn't show up is only in relation to the idea of it, because if I have this idea that they must, they have to, how dare they not, as opposed to any actual consequence in relation to my goal of having the party and enjoying it. Okay? And that's why we say in rational living therapy, you cannot have a problem without having a goal. Okay? You cannot have a problem without having a goal. Okay. And so, and this now is going to lead into something else that can be very helpful during the holiday seasons. In rational living therapy, we like to categorize problems into two types, okay? There are practical problems and there are emotional problems. A practical problem is a situation where you have a goal and there's something standing in the way of achieving that goal, making it more difficult to achieve that goal. For example, let's say that on the way to work one morning, your car breaks down. That your car breaking down would interfere with your goal of getting to work, which very well might interfere with your goal of earning money and paying your bills. So that would be a practical problem. An emotional problem usually is in reaction to a practical problem. It's the upset you feel in reaction to your car being broken. So if a person's car breaks down and they make themselves upset about it, they actually have two problems: their car and their unwanted misery. But why do most people lump them together and think they only have one problem? It's because they think the car being broken is making them upset. So therefore, as long as the car is broken, what do they think they have to feel? Upset. Instead, what we're going to help them to understand is actually there are two problems here: the car and your unwanted misery. Okay. Now, would you agree with me that most human beings like to have the fewest number of problems possible at any given point? Would you say that's a fair statement? Sure. Maybe some that's not the case, but most human beings, if given the opportunity to have two problems or one problem, would rather have just one problem. Okay. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Secondly, does the car care whether we're miserable about it or not? No, the car couldn't care less. It will be just as broken whether we are miserable about it or not. So therefore, if you had an opportunity to have your car broken and not be miserable about it, I would bet you would pick that option over having your car broken and being upset about it, right? And so this is the essence of what we call Stoic philosophy. Okay. And let me back up for a minute here. And the aspect of Stoic philosophy that we're talking about here is that reality does not care how we emotionally react to it. Reality could not care less. And so therefore, as long as we will have this problem, whether we're miserable about it or not, we might as well give up the misery, or at least learn how to if we do not know how. This makes such a tremendous difference for people when they understand this. What a huge difference when they understand this. That reality doesn't care, so we might as well work at giving up our misery about it, learning how to. And so a way to apply in relation to the holidays, this aspect of Stoic philosophy, is you really wanted people to be there for the holidays, or maybe someone has passed, and obviously cannot be there for the holiday. An attitude to work at developing and cementing in your head is that people are missing from the dinner table, for example, or from unwrapping gifts or whatever it is that we do, whether we are miserable about it or not. You see? Or we do not have the money for this, whether we are miserable about it or not. I can't get to my family, whether I'm miserable about it or not. I don't have a date for a New Year's Eve, whether I am miserable about it or not. So therefore, I have a decision to make. I can not have a date for New Year's Eve and be miserable, or not have a date for New Year's Eve and be sad because I'm disappointed. But either way, you don't have a date for New Year's Eve. See, and this is what a huge difference, because then what that does is helps us then to enjoy other aspects. Look, no amount of misery is going to make the person that I would love to be at the dinner table magically appear. As much as I wish she were there, it's just not happening. No amount of misery is going to change that. So I might as well work at appreciating and enjoying and being thankful for the people who are there and the time that we can spend together. See, what a beautiful thing. So it's not caring, and it's not feeling. It's just coming to the realization that no amount of misery is going to change things. So I might as well learn how to give it up, if that's what I'm wanting. Now, if a person said, my preference is to be miserable on the holiday, then I would say that's your business. Who am I to say you're not allowed? I'd want to make sure that, in fact, that was a desire and not something they thought they had to feel. But otherwise, go for it. Who am I to say you're not allowed? Okay. So this aspect of Stoic philosophy can be very, very helpful for these situations like this. Okay. All right. Another thing to consider about the holidays is, what am I actually celebrating? What is the point? Where is your focus? For example, Christmas. Okay. Is it, if a person is a Christian and they are celebrating Christmas, is Christmas about the earthly birth of Jesus, or is it International Gift Giving and Receiving Day? You see, just what is the point of the holiday? When I was a pastor and preaching, I remember one Christmas, because people were upset about this and that in relation to the season. I said, and I just told them, I said, look, if you are upset about anything during this Christmas season related to Christmas, it's not about the fact that Jesus was born. And if you are upset about the fact that Jesus was born, then please see me after the service. Okay. All right. So it's all these other things that got attached to that. But it can happen with any holiday, right? You can attach anything to Independence Day, anything to Memorial Day or Valentine's Day. Anything can be attached to, associated with it. Okay. So what am I actually celebrating? If it's a celebration, what am I actually celebrating? And so is it possible to enjoy this day, focusing on the meaning of it, even though we didn't have any money to buy anyone presents, even though half the family is not coming over this year, even though I'm not feeling well. Even though we're late on our bills, whatever the case may be, is it possible for me to be thankful for, what this holiday represents? Of course it is. Okay. And then you look, oh, what a horrible thing it is. I'm going to miss out on New Year's Eve, or, this, that, and the other, or, all this celebration. Wow, we're going to celebrate that there's a new year. So, but that's okay. If that's your thing, go for it. But it's what a horrible thing it is that I'm missing out on that. So the question is, how much different will life be really on January 1st than it was on December 31st? What happens when the clock strikes 12? So there's all this hooray, hooray, hooray. But really, if you think about it, under both circumstances, life is pretty much the same way the next day, except people might have hangovers and all that. Okay. So it's thinking about what's the point of this holiday? And have I really gone off track, and complicated it and given myself reasons to upset myself if things don't work out? Okay. Someone mentioned that difficulty forgetting bad experiences associated with the holidays. And I remember years ago, I had a woman who came to me who was her father died in her arms unexpectedly. They were unwrapping presents, of all things. Died in her arms unexpectedly on Christmas Day. And so she said to me, I don't know how I can ever enjoy Christmas again. And I had this image that pops into my head, of him dying, and there wasn't anything I could do about it, and all those things. Well, one of the things, by the way, is what we call rational hypnotherapy. That can be helpful for situations like that. And if you want to know more about that, please feel free to email me. You could respond to the email that I will send out to you all with the link to the recording and all that. Be glad to let you know about it. But also work on any irrational thoughts about the experience. Like that complicate matters, like it was my fault. There's no way I could ever enjoy a Christmas again. There's no way I could ever think about anything other than that. Different ideas that complicate matters as opposed to it sure was very unfortunate that Dad died on Christmas Day. But of course, it probably would have found it unfortunate if he had died a month before or a month after, right? Develop new rational replacement thoughts and practice them. And one of the things you can do is practice visualizing yourself with whatever it is you do on your holiday, with a smile on your face and enjoying other people's company and all those things. Practicing that imagery rather than holding your dad in your arms who's dying. And just like I said, create new images of the holiday and practice them. Okay. And in relation to missing people who have passed, people often depress themselves when they think things like, it's not whatever holiday without Dad being around, coupled with this holiday must be the way it was when Dad was around. Okay. So what's the solution to that? The kind of attitude that says something like this: we sure do miss Dad and loved him. That's supposed to be loved him being with us for the holidays, and we wish he were here. We can be happy with new traditions and activities for the holidays. So you're not lying to yourself. You're not saying it doesn't matter whether Dad is here or not. No, I wish he were here. It's unfortunate that he's not. We will miss him. However, we are going to focus on new traditions, maybe that because there are certain things we couldn't do without dad, perhaps. But we're going to focus on new traditions and new activities, and enjoy those. Okay. Anxiety related. How will I do this holiday without my wife? I can't stand it without her. What's the solution? An idea like there's nothing about the holiday that is absolutely required, like someone will die if I mess it up. In other words, treating it like it's surgery and someone's going to die if I make a wrong cut. No, it's there are certain things maybe that people are expecting and all, but it's not a life or death situation for me to make myself this anxious about. I will miss her greatly and would give anything to have her here with me, but I can stand it. I just don't like it. So granted, if and this is where the things other than what you're actually celebrating come into play. Um, things like certain traditions that you had. Well, I remember my wife used to do this, or she used to sing that, or this, that, and the other, and you miss that, and that's fine. But to treat it as though you can't take it if you don't have that, no, no. It's unfortunate and sad for you that you don't have that any longer. So therefore you're disappointed, you're sad because of it. And now, with only being sad and disappointed, now, because you're thinking this new way, now you stand a much better chance of talking yourself into enjoying other aspects of the holiday. So yeah, I'd give anything. A person might think give anything to hear my wife, sing this song that she used to, or what have you. But the fact is, she's not around to do that. So it's unfortunate. I will work at finding happiness with other things. And here's where that Stoic philosophy comes in: because I might as well, because no amount of misery is going to change a thing. Okay? Anger, it's not fair that they are not here. They should be here with me. Solution, they're not here because all the necessary ingredients for them to pass were present. And so part of what happens with anger and people passing away is a certain amount of entitlement mentality. Like I was entitled to more time with them. So sometimes, people need to challenge themselves on that idea. Is it a fact that I was entitled to any amount of time? No. Where's the evidence that I was owed or entitled to any amount of time? Therefore, as much as I am sad that they are not here, I will focus on being grateful for the time I had with them rather than having an entitlement mentality. And really, gratitude is the antidote for entitlement mentality. Um, Gratitude, where's the evidence that, I mean, the fact is, we could have gotten married and one of us died a week later. So it's so therefore let me shift my focus from thinking I'm acting as though I was entitled to more, to being grateful for what we did have, wishing that I'd had more time with them, but being grateful for what I did have. Let's see here. Loneliness, I can't stand being alone by myself. Solution, I can stand it, but I don't like it. I strongly prefer to be with others, especially during the holidays. And since I prefer to be with others, I will do what I can to make that so. However, if I cannot achieve that, I will be okay. It will only be unfortunate, not terrible, horrible off. Okay. Another thing to do is refuse to fall for unrealistic images. These images give the impression that we are missing out. You know, so for example, refusing to fall or refuse to fall. That's supposed to be refuse to fall for the commercial picture of how things should be during the holidays. Don't you just love the commercials where a guy's wife walks out to the house and they see a brand new car with a bow on it? How many people are going to be able to do that for Christmas this year, or Hanukkah, whatever, right? Whatever holiday you do, not many. And so it's this, well, wow, yeah, I sure wish I could do that for my wife, and how horrible it is that I can't. And meanwhile, the wife is saying, I wish my husband could do that for me, and how terrible it is that he can't. So refuse to fall for this. Of course, they're going to try to pitch what they can to try to sell what they have to sell, but refuse to fall for it. And refuse to believe the images nowadays that you see on social media as if they represent the entirety of their experience. It's doubtful that you're going to see pictures of any negative aspect of it. You're certainly not, well, so that's just the point. Is just focus on what you're doing and be thankful. Make yourself thankful by refusing to think in an entitled way. Be thankful for what you have. Overcome distress and tolerance. That's another part of this. I'm depressed about this, and I can't stand feeling depressed. What I call distress intolerance. Can't stand feeling depressed or anxious or angry. Change that from I can't stand it to, as much as it is unpleasant, I can stand it. I just don't like it. And the best proof I have that I can stand feeling depressed, anxious, that's supposed to be, or angry, is because I'm around to complain about it. If I couldn't stand it, it would kill me. And so therefore, once again, we're taking emotional distress out of the category of life-threatening and putting it into the category of unpleasant and uncomfortable, where it belongs, because that's all it is. So because of that, that's why I say refrain from trying to medicate yourself with alcohol or other drugs. They will only make matters worse. Okay, and so work at that. I can stand feeling this way. I just don't like it. Now, just because you realize you can stand it does not mean you want to feel that way. And that's where the rest of rational self-counseling comes into play, identifying irrational thoughts and correcting them. And sometimes people need the help of a therapist to do that. But okay, break response chains. I know we're over here. I'll wrap things up here in a second. Recognize patterns. If you know you upset yourself in a certain situation, plan to prevent that. So if you start to upset yourself, you can switch to alternative behavior. So, for example, if you know that you are very intolerant of people being in your way, but you haven't quite worked that out so that you are more tolerant, shop at a time when there are fewer people there, so that you minimize that. Or if you know that when you're together with family, if certain people bring up a topic, if people bring up a certain topic, then things will, people will start arguing with each other. You perhaps can, since you know that pattern, you can head it off by quickly changing the subject, you see. But then conversely, there's something else you can do that's not breaking response chains, and that is expose yourself repeatedly until the undesired reaction weakens. Like I saw someone whose husband died a year ago. She posted on Facebook, I just can't take this hearing Christmas music. I'm just too sad when I listen to Christmas music now since he died. So one thing she could do, if she wanted to enjoy the Christmas music like she used to, is she could just repeatedly listen to it, just over and over. I mean, she could put on music on her streaming device or whatever, or or just put it on one of these stations, 24-hour Christmas music, and just listen to it over and over and over until that reaction weakens. And so that could be something that would be helpful to her. Okay, so any question about anything before we wrap things up? Any questions or concerns about anything? We have a list of self-help webinars that we're starting in January. If you'd like to check them out, visit rational-living-therapy.com, and you'll see a menu item for them. You can see what's upcoming, various topics and all. And also, I'm pleased to announce that in January, I will start hosting the Rational Living Show with yours truly on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be it'll be streamed, a lot of different things, both the video and the audio on Podbean. If you use the app, you can call in, ask questions, and interact that way. But it'll also be broadcast live on YouTube and all, and also the recordings will be on iTunes and all those different streaming channels as well. Okay, so I already have a list of topics for it'll be a weekly show on Wednesdays, and for the next year. So Lord willing, we have a year of shows planned out, and sometimes I'll have guests, and really look forward to it. So I encourage you to check. I'll send you information on that in that email as well. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay. Someone's saying that it'd be very helpful to their clients. I'm so glad. That's terrific. All right. Well, with that said, thank you so much for joining me today. And what I wish you is happy holidays, or at least content holidays, anyhow. All right. All right, everybody, take care. Hope to see you again soon.